Welcome to KrassenCast News Now. We have a lot to talk about today, and Brian, I'll just let you jump right into it.
Yeah, so this week we found out some pretty significant news concerning Saudi Arabia and the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, known as PIF, which is headed by none other than Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. So PIF owns 93% of the LIV golf tournament, and they pay 100% of all costs associated with the events that they have. As you may or may not know, former President Trump has hosted two main events with the LIV Golf Association. One of them was at his Bedminster Resort back in June of last year, and another one was at his Doral Resort in October, just a few months ago. So basically, in other words, the Saudi Crown Prince, MBS, is paying Trump millions of dollars to host these events. These events have been criticized by many around the world just because Saudi Arabia is behind them. And now we know they actually own 93% of the tournament. But you can note that tickets for the LIV Golf event at the Bedminster Hotel that Trump owns, the National Golf Club that he owns in June, were going for as much as $4,250 a piece. And then he had that other event in Doral back in October. Trump, back in June, told the Wall Street Journal that the Saudi Arabia-backed golf event circuit has been worth billions of dollars, quote, billions of dollars for Saudi Arabia. And these are the events that he's obviously helping to host. According to longtime golf writer Alan Shipnuck, the numbers on how much Trump has made from these events is a bit murky. But according to club members, Trump has received $4.5 million alone just for the Bedminster event. And I'm assuming that it was a similar amount for the Doral event. So that's $9 million for two events he's received, basically directly from the Saudi Arabian government. So I think remember that when you hear people complaining about Hunter Biden taking money from foreign business deals as a private citizen, that Trump, just 5 months after he left office, he had a $4.5 million deal with the Saudis to host one of their events. And this is while he was considering a run for 2024, which has now turned into an actual campaign. So I think that it's important to realize that Trump's ties with the Saudis are incredibly tight, and it's incredibly dangerous to think that this man could be running for office, or not could be. He is running for office in 2024 for the president of the United States, while Saudi Arabia, who is an adversary, is paying him possibly tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic, right? So, but this isn't the only issue with, these foreign business ties in the Trump family. Again, you hear Hunter Biden, private citizen Hunter Biden. What about Jared Kushner, who essentially was working in the White House, heading up all of the Middle Eastern policy for the United States, while he is also making business deals with these Middle Eastern countries? Like, do you not care about that stuff? So here's an example. In 2018, Jared Kushner's building, his family asset, 666 Fifth Avenue in New York, was struggling. They couldn't get a bank to give them a loan. All the banks were saying, this is a tear down. This building is a piece of crap. It needs to be torn down. And then suddenly, while Saudi Arabia was blockading Qatar, and Donald Trump was supporting that blockade of Qatar, which was hurting Qatar's economy, Qatar, through Brookfield, which was a Canadian business firm, and Qatar Investment Authority actually was the second largest investor in Brookfield, decides to give Jared Kushner $1.2 billion in the form of a 99-year lease. It was unheard of. Like, it just didn't make sense. And then suddenly, after that lease is given to Kushner, Donald Trump decides not to support the Saudi blockade of Qatar anymore. And Qatar's economy could rebound. Qatar was in much better shape. So, like, if you're criticizing Hunter Biden for being a private citizen and making money in foreign countries, just like, Jared Kushner did while he was working in the White House, I think is a little bit hypocritical. Personally, I don't think sons or relatives of the president really should be doing business outside the United States while their relative is the president of the United States. But isn't it much worse if you are actually working in the White House on Middle Eastern policy, making business deals with Middle Eastern countries? Is that not a
It's
conflict of
crazy.
interest? And then he leaves the White House, Kushner leaves the White House, and a few months later, he gets an investment from Saudi Arabia. I mean, is that not concerning to anyone?
Yeah, I mean, you can't even compare the two. You can't compare what Kushner did with Hunter Biden, who was a private citizen making money as an advisor for companies overseas, while his father, I don't even think he was vice president at the time, and maybe it overlapped a little bit, and he was vice president part of the time. But it's totally different than actually having your son-in-law and your daughter working within the White House on Middle Eastern policy while getting money from these Middle Eastern countries. Like you can't even compare the two. One is so much further away than the other. So I think that if you are one of those people shouting Hunter Biden this, Hunter Biden that, look at Kushner first. I'm not saying that what Hunter did is ethically correct, but I think you got to definitely concentrate on Kushner.
Yeah, like it goes back to what I said earlier in that I don't like the fact that the relatives of president are doing business overseas. I just think if it's not a conflict of interest, it gives the certain appearance of a conflict of interest. I think if you're a foreign government and you have the opportunity to hire somebody related to the president, you're going to do so with the hopes of influencing American policy toward your country or toward your business in that country. So I don't want to say Hunter Biden did anything wrong, but I think the motives of the companies in these other countries hiring Hunter Biden and these companies or these governments paying Jared Kushner definitely had motives to benefit themselves at the expense of America.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So let's move on to Twitter Spaces. That there's been several Twitter Spaces talking about the Twitter files, right? And there's a lot of back and forth in these spaces, especially about whether the FBI was influencing Twitter. Should they have been contacting Twitter saying, hey, check out this information. Let's have this. Can you remove this certain information? And I think that there's no doubt that there's some iffy things that took place, but Elon Musk, I feel, is going about things the wrong way, right? So he's releasing these Twitter files in batches by journalists, which you could claim some are definitely right-leaning in their approach. And these journalists are creating a narrative around documents that they're selecting themselves to talk about. I I think my biggest issue is that Elon and these journalists are creating a narrative around small sections of a larger database of information that Twitter has in their repository. So why not just release all of the data that they can, have the Twitter attorneys go through everything and just do a big dump, make it like WikiLeaks and just dump everything, and then let us decide what's what. Don't have biased, arguably biased journalists creating a narrative and picking and choosing, cherry picking these emails that they want to show.
I don't even want to say that journalists are biased, because if they're journalists, they shouldn't be biased, right? But Elon Musk is going to have some biases. And I don't think these journalists can just walk into Twitter and say, I want to see this, I want to see this, I want to see this, and just automatically get it. I think Elon Musk and the current team at Twitter are the ones deciding what they're releasing to these journalists. So, for example, today's Twitter files talked about Pfizer trying to influence Twitter and trying to get certain things deleted, certain accounts banned, et cetera. But my guess is that there's literally thousands and thousands of companies that also contacted Twitter trying to do the same thing. But Twitter's only releasing the data on Pfizer because Elon Musk is kind of iffy about the vaccine and thinks that freedom of speech should have applied rather than trying to cover up some of this, misinformation. So
Yep.
like you said, I think it should all be released and let all journalists, not just hand-chosen journalists, cover whatever they want out of the data that Twitter has.
Yeah, and I actually had a chance to speak with Lee Fang, who did this last Twitter Files drop about Pfizer and about these biotechnology companies, pharma companies that were contacting Twitter to ask them to look into censoring certain content. And Lee told me that basically he can request documents from the Twitter attorney. So he sends a request in, then they send something back. And so they're going through the Twitter attorneys right now. But I'm assuming that Elon Musk, and this is an assumption, is telling these journalists, hey, do a story about this, do a story about this, do one about Pfizer, or do one about the pharmaceutical companies and the COVID vaccine. And they're not just he's not just giving everybody leeway to just cover everything. And maybe I'm wrong. I'd definitely like some clarity on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see, has the NRA contacted Twitter to ask for removal or information to be censored? Has anybody in the Republican Party contacted Twitter for the same thing? Like, there's a lot that could have been taking place that we're not seeing because Elon Musk is choosing to release certain stuff. So
Yeah.
in other news, the White House counsel's office says there are no visitor logs at Biden's Wilmington, Delaware home. And this is in line with all previous presidents across decades of modern history, where personal residents of the president are not required to keep visitor logs. And it's funny because a lot of people on the right are like, how dare Biden not have visitor logs of his own personal home? Meanwhile, if you recall, Donald Trump actually stopped keeping visitor logs in the White House. He said, no, I don't want the public knowing who's coming to visit me in the White House. And Republicans were pretty much fine with that. But now that Biden doesn't have visitor logs at his personal residence, it's a problem for them. Again, I think it's kind of hypocritical. Biden, of course, has restored the White House visitor logs. They are now publicly made available on a weekly basis. And also, people are saying the Secret Service must have visitor logs of Biden's personal property. And again, they said they don't actually maintain visitor logs on Biden's home, just like they haven't maintained visitor logs on other presidents' personal property. People are calling for these visitor logs, but these same people really don't care to see the MarALago visitor logs where other classified top secret and SCI documents were being held.
Well, not to mention that there was actually, I believe, a Chinese spy that was actually a member of MarALago and could have potentially had access to some of these documents. I'm not saying they did have access to these. Most likely they didn't. But I think it's another case of hypocrisy where comparing the Mar-a-Lago situation to the Biden situation, it really is apples to oranges. Trump, of course, he took these documents. The National Archives had requested them back for well over a year, and he never gave them back. And then he received subpoenas for them, and he ignored the subpoenas. Now,
He
look at
lied. He
Biden.
lied. His lawyer signed a certification saying we've turned everything over. So he essentially lied to the FBI. He lied to the grand jury in response to their subpoena. And he just was hiding. He was moving documents around according to the cameras that they had set up in Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, and then look at the Biden situation. Now, we don't know the total circumstances. We don't know what were in the documents. We don't know if Biden brought these back to his home by himself. I'm guessing most likely that's not the case. I'm guessing that somebody packed them up for him and they accidentally put something in the boxes that were headed to these various locations. And Biden's attorney found them. Biden's attorney found them, immediately contacted the National Archives, and immediately figured out a way to have these documents returned. They didn't question them. They didn't say, oh no, Biden's not going to return these. They notified the National Archives, whereas the National Archives notified Trump for a year that they needed these documents back, and Trump refused to give most of them back. So totally different situation. And I think that the mainstream media comparing the two and acting like one situation's the same as the other, it's just a disservice to the country in general and to our national security apparatus.
And I think whenever classified documents are not where they're supposed to be or are being held somewhere they're not supposed to be, I think it's a problem. And I think we do need investigations into who saw these documents, how they got there, why were they being kept there, et cetera. So I think in both cases, Biden and Trump, I think we need investigation. We need to get to the bottom of it. We don't have all the information in either case. I think we have to be patient and wait for all that information to come out. But, Trump has done nothing but attack the FBI, imply that they planted documents at MarALago. And meanwhile, Biden's been cooperating and definitely not attacking the FBI or the DOJ for what they're doing. He's just cooperating and saying, let's get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, I mean, that's another situation. So you have Trump basically calling special counsel Jack Wilson a terrorist. He literally called him a terrorist for investigating what took place with these documents, as well as the January 6th stuff. But when you look at the other situation with Biden, and Biden says we are cooperating with investigation totally and completely. So you have Biden cooperating, doing whatever he can to help, while you have Trump calling the people investigating the situation terrorists. So another situation that I think the media kind of comparing these, it's just a disservice.
Well, and then you compare the two different special counsels, and with Jack Smith, Republicans are attacking the fact that his wife had donated to Democrats, but then the guy investigating Biden, Robert Hur, was actually appointed by Trump, worked under Christopher Wray, who was another Trump appointee, and the Republicans are also attacking him, like saying he's going to be biased in favor of Biden. So you can't win no matter who's investigating Trump, who's investigating Biden. I feel Republicans are going to say it's an unfair investigation. I guess we can't win, right?
Right. And I look forward to both investigations and getting the facts. And I don't think you hear many people on the left criticizing the investigation into Biden, but you do hear multiple people on the right criticizing the investigation into Trump. And not even arguably, Trump's situation is far worse than what's happening with Biden right now.
Yeah, and that's all the news we have for you today. Thanks for watching and listening to our podcast, KrassenCast News Now. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.